Hi, my name is Chris and this is Battle Nonsense. Like Minecraft, Fortnite is not only an extremely popular game, it is also available on pretty much every platform. But Fortnite, or better said the Fortnite fans, managed to achieve something that no one else, not even Minecraft, could do before. They got Sony to allow Epic Games to fully enable crossplay on the PlayStation, so that you can not only play with your friends who use a PC, but also with players who use a Nintendo Switch or an Xbox. But Fortnite does not only have full crossplay support now on the PlayStation 4, it even has native mouse and keyboard support, which obviously provides a much better experience than those third-party mouse and keyboard input adapters, where the game still treats the input signals as if they were coming from a controller, as the game does not know that you use a mouse and a keyboard then. So it's really great that you can play Fortnite with all your friends now, no matter on which platform they are. And you decide if you want to use a controller or a mouse and a keyboard. However, for the average console player, it would not be fair to end up on the same server as players who use a mouse and a keyboard. So while the matchmaker no longer cares about which platform you are on, it now takes your input device into account when it decides on which server it should place you. So when you launch Fortnite on the PlayStation 4, then you see your region and your active input device here. In this case, I get a controller icon, which means that when I press play, then everyone on the server will use a controller like I do. When I then try to plug in my mouse and keyboard after I joined the server, then the mouse won't work and I get an input blocked notification. So it is not possible to join a controller-only server and then switch to the mouse and keyboard to gain an unfair advantage. When I then connect my mouse and keyboard while I'm in the lobby, then the icon in the top right changes to a mouse and a keyboard, which means that when I press play now, then I will get placed on a server where the other players also use a mouse and a keyboard. However, on such a server I can still switch back to my controller, as well as go back to my mouse and keyboard at any time, as using a controller on a mouse and keyboard server is not considered to be an issue. Now, what happens when you use a controller but play with someone who uses a mouse and a keyboard? This could be someone on PC or another PlayStation. As soon as that player joins your group, you will get switched to the mouse and keyboard matchmaker. And when that player leaves, then you get switched back again. PC players get a special treatment though, because while you can also connect the controller to a PC, the PC player will always end up on a mouse and keyboard server. This is also why a player on the PlayStation will see the matchmaker switch to mouse and keyboard when he plays with someone who is on PC, even when the PC player uses a controller. Maybe Epic Games will in the future block the mouse and keyboard input on PC once the PC player switches to the controller, and then allow the PC player to join a controller-only server. But currently this is not the case, and players on PlayStation must be aware of that when they play with friends who are on PC. What you can also do now is completely customize the button mapping of the controller, and if you connect the mouse and the keyboard, then you can also fully customize these like you can on the PC. Now, while there are players who are really good with the controller, we know that players who use a mouse and keyboard have an advantage over most players who use a controller, which is why many console players and developers consider using an input adapter as cheating, and why Epic Games decided to separate players by their input device, as I just explained. What we don't know yet is if the native mouse and keyboard support provides less input lag than the PlayStation 4 controller, so that's what we will have a look at now. First of all, how do I measure how long it takes a game to respond to your input, or how much time there is between the press of the button and the pixel showing up on your monitor? To measure this input or button to pixel delay, I use a high-speed camera, a TV as well as a gaming monitor, and a mouse which has an LED connected directly to the switch of its left mouse button, which will light up when I press it. The PlayStation 4 controller does not have many switches inside, as you can see here, which is why I had to connect the LED to the switch below the right thumbstick. Thankfully, Fortnite allows the player to completely remap all buttons, so I could map the attack action to that button. Now, to measure the delay, I point my high-speed camera at the display and then record what happens when I press the fire button. Inside the recorded high-speed footage, I then look for the frame where the LED turns on, and then I count the frames until I see the gunfire, which gives me the delay between the button and the pixel. Now, in the first test which I did on my Samsung TV, I measured an average input lag of about 200 milliseconds or 0.2 seconds, which is a very bad result and shows that TVs are simply not optimized for gaming. They are meant to make TV shows and movies look as good as possible by applying a ton of post-processing effects which add a lot of delay. Luckily, my TV also provides a game mode, which disables all the image processing and brings the button to pixel delay down to about 105 milliseconds on average. So if your TV has a game mode, then you should use that as it can significantly lower the input lag. If your TV does not have such a feature, then you can only try to manually disable all the image processing features in the menu. Or you might want to consider to play on a gaming monitor, which does not have any of these post-processing features and offers delays that are even a bit lower than what my TV can do with the game mode enabled. Now, all tests so far were done with the controller in wireless mode. I've seen players argue that the controller has less lag when you connect it to the PlayStation 4 by using an USB cable. But based on my test results, this does not seem to affect the button to pixel delay. So I'd say that there is no point in having an USB cable run across your living room. Now, what happens when you use a gaming mouse like the Logitech G402 on the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 4 Pro? Well, especially players who come from the PC will enjoy the precision that you get from the native mouse and keyboard support on the PlayStation 4. It does not lead to a significant input lag decrease. So if you're used to play with the mouse and the keyboard, then you will do better than with the controller, but you won't get less input lag. The PlayStation 4 Pro also offers a boost mode, which is meant to use the additional processing power of the console to improve the frame rate of games that were not specifically optimized for that console. In my tests, the boost mode had no impact on the input lag in Fortnite, but that is most likely down to the fact that the game is already well optimized and hits 60 FPS. So the boost mode does not increase the FPS further, as consoles don't do more than 60 frames per second as they run at a refresh rate of 60 Hz. Now, how does this compare to the PC version of Fortnite? With VSync enabled, which locks the frame rate at 60 when you also use a refresh rate of 60 Hz, the average input lag is about 20 milliseconds lower than on the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro. With VSync disabled and the frame rate locked at 60 FPS at 60 Hz, we then get an average button to pixel delay of 32 milliseconds or about 2 frames at 60 FPS, as well as tearing, which is quite annoying at 60 FPS. Increasing the refresh rate to 144 Hz and the frame rate to 144 FPS further decreases the average input lag by another 11 milliseconds. However, as I said in previous videos, the big difference between 60 Hz and 144 Hz displays is not that these reduce the input lag by 10 milliseconds. It's that the game feels a lot smoother as 144 Hz monitors are able to show you more frames per second than a 60 Hz monitor, which causes that the game looks and feels more fluid. Also, tearing is much less intrusive when your monitor can display 120 or 144 frames per second. And that's a nice bonus if you don't have a FreeSync or G-Sync display, which unlike V-Sync eliminate tearing without increasing the input lag. If you want to find out more about FreeSync and G-Sync, then you can find a link to that video in the description down below. So, gaming on console has more input lag than on PC, mainly because TVs are not designed for low latency gaming and because you cannot disable VSync on console, which increases the button to pixel delay by at least 50 milliseconds. So, since the Season 6 update, it is now down to your personal preference which input device you want to play Fortnite with on the PlayStation 4. You can choose what you like best and the matchmaker will then take your input device into account when it tries to find a server for you. Now I hope that Sony will eventually allow all developers to fully enable crossplay on their platform, so that developers then only have to separate players by the input device of their choice and not their platform. While every game benefits from a unified player base, it will especially help smaller and indie titles. Because instead of 10,000 players on PlayStation and 10,000 players on Xbox, you then have 20,000 players on console to play with. Which means faster matchmaking and that games live longer so that you can actually find a match a few months after their release. So cross-platform play is good for gamers and good for developers. The native mouse and keyboard support will then hopefully also put an end to these input adapters, as even the very expensive ones still feel quite bad and don't come close to native mouse and keyboard support, as the game still treats the input as if it would come from a controller. So I hope that more games on the PlayStation and the Xbox will add native mouse and keyboard support in the near future. But if you are interested in an input lag analysis of such an input adapter, then you can find a link to my test video in the description down below. And that's all for today. A massive shout out to all my patrons, because this kind of test and the upcoming netcode analysis tests of multiplayer games on the PlayStation 4 are only possible thanks to their support. If you enjoy the work that I do here on my channel and would like to support me as well, then there is a link to my Patreon in the description down below, where you will also find links to my social accounts in case that you want to stay up to date on the videos that I'm working on. So if you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, have a nice day and take care. My name is Chris and this was Battle Nonsense.